So Virtua Cop, it's a game. It's a shooting game. In this game, you have to shoot the bad guys. As you can see, I got my gun. Now, because of some limitations of the Tiger screen, hang on. Oh, got hit. Gotta find that sweet spot. There it is. Because of the limitations of the Tiger screen, you have to shoot one of these 4 infrared sensors on the side of the screen, as opposed to aiming directly at the bad guy. You can see bad guys are kind of popping in roughly at one of the 4 corners, and you're supposed to kind of learn which corner is associated with which kind of bad guy and shoot the appropriate corner. Now, on top of this, in order to reload, I have to shoot this lower left-hand corner, because that's where the ammo is getting drawn. So let me go ahead and start the next level. So I get a little closer. Trying to do multiple things at once here is not easy. Got him. So that's the overall. For a Tiger game, the graphics are pretty good. You can clearly see which guys are bad guys. The background's colorful. And the marquee art on the screen as always. Tiger always did a good job of making marquees on their games. Come on. Oh, I got reload. Shit. Oh, fuck. There it is. Not great at this game, especially when trying to hold the camera. But, as you can see, there's a little bit of advantage to this game. There's a light here that goes off whenever you successfully hit. And this little gun that I'm holding is actually battery powered separately from the game. Has its own little speaker. Oh shit. Ah, I got hit. Reload. So there's actually 2 devices making sounds when I shoot. There's a little that's getting made by the handheld gun itself. And then when I successfully hit, that's one little blurry. When I successfully hit, the game will make a separate noise. So, yeah, beyond that, challenges in the game, I mean, as long as you keep up and you hit the right corner, you're good. Oh, shit. As long as you're keeping up, you'll do okay. It does get quite frenetic after a while. I've gotten about level 7 before when I'm not recording. Screen capture's a little hard in this. As you can see, you have to use a cell phone to do it. But otherwise, it's pretty accurate. Let's take a look at the gun itself a little bit. You can see, let's see if I can focus this a little bit. It's a piece of plastic. Handle folds down so you can kind of hold it like this. It's got this little indent in the back, so you can kind of put that between your thumb and pointer finger. Then you can see whenever I press that button, it makes noise. And it's got a little AAA battery that goes in here. And when you're done, you just turn this guy off. This folds out. And storage for later. Take it to your friend's house, take it to school, take it to work. You can play Virtua Cop wherever you want. It's overall a pretty neat game. Haven't beaten it yet, but I've gotten a pretty high score in it. So, overall, A+. Alrighty, so Virtua Cop for realsies this time. So, for the start of the NFGL, I went ahead and chose Virtua Cop for the Sega Saturn. And I had a couple of reasons for choosing this. I mean, the obvious one is that it fits well with the Fanboy Season set. And also, I really like light gun games, and Virtua Cop was one of those light gun games that I played quite a bit of in high school. So, and, you know, the NFGL is about not just beating games, and not even just enjoying the games you're playing, but also sharing those. So it seemed appropriate that I kick it off with something like this. So what's Virtua Cop about? Well, for starters, Virtua Cop is inspired a lot by late 80s, early 90s cop action movies. The player plays as a police officer for the Virtua City Police Department. He's tasked with taking down a gang of armed smugglers using the only means any good action movie cop has, his wits and his gun. One thing that's also kind of nostalgic about this theme and this setup is the choice of bad guys. They went ahead and went with just kind of generic punk bad guy armed smugglers. They got sunglasses and suits, or they have bright jackets. There's no implication of nationality or whether they're terrorists, which is really a stark contrast with action movies, or really most cinema today, where there's a heavy influence from the events of September 11th, where most bad guys are terrorists, usually foreign, and they're all about destroying infrastructure and causing chaos. So to step back, it's pretty nostalgic for that reason. So what do you do in Virtua Cop? Well, Virtua Cop is a light gun arcade shooter, and it follows a lot of the tropes very closely. An arcade light gun shooter is this merging between the old style mechanical shooting gallery games that you might have seen on like Back to the Future Part 3 or maybe an amusement park, along with electronic games and all the sophistication they bring in. The ability to make interactive environments, have a smooth moving camera through a 3D environment, being able to choose multiple weapons and introduce sophisticated game mechanics. Because of this, you have a very sophisticated game with very simple mechanics. Really, your job is to shoot bad guys, shoot other arbitrary targets, and fight bosses, which kind of mixes those two together. You're either shooting some known hostile or you're shooting down projectiles. So in order to make the game interesting, there are several ways in which Virtua Cop introduces challenge to the player. The first way, which is very clearly derived from the shooting gallery origins, are bad guys that just pop up from cover or pop up from the side of the screen. The intent is to surprise the player, catch him off guard, so you might not shoot him right away. This is a very early method of introducing challenge. Probably the first 2 or 3 guys you fight in the game are introduced this way, and the player can quickly overcome it, kind of get an idea for what the pace of the light gun shooter is. Once this form of challenge is mastered, players are next introduced to a means of diverting their attention. Usually you'll have toggling between a bad guy in the foreground and quickly a bad guy in the background. Or one enemy comes from one side of the screen and another one comes from the other side. The idea is to draw the player's attention to one bad guy, and then again, catch him off guard with one coming from the other side. To further this sort of diversion tactic, soon special targets are introduced. These are civilians. They're targets that you're not supposed to shoot, otherwise you lose a health. Civilians will be interleaved with rapid successions of bad guys, or they'll pop up out of cover in between 2 other bad guys, really just to get in the way. It's really meant to make the player think twice before pulling the trigger, which can often be the cause of death in games like this. Now with these 3 basic tactics, you then see the game evolve and start introducing large waves of enemies. The player themselves only have a 6-shot pistol, and in order to reload you shoot off the screen, which also means you're not pointing your gun at the screen and you're interrupting your own ability to shoot bad guys. When you're introduced to a large wave of bad guys then, you're forced to not just shoot and fire and forget, but make choices about when to reload. When could there be a little bit of breathing room between the 2 bad guys that you just shot, so you can reload, refill your chamber, and continue, because oftentimes you'll fight waves of more than 6 guys. With these different means of introducing challenge, the player can then mitigate some of this through either repeated play and memorization, or with weapons that are scattered throughout the game. You have, if I remember correctly, 3 different weapons you can get. You can get a shotgun, which gives you a slightly bigger blast radius on the screen, which can help mitigate some accuracy issues. You've got an automatic, which is an automatic pistol with an increased clip size, which is very advantageous when you get to those large waves of enemies. You've also got a machine gun, which cannot be reloaded, but still has an extended clip, and you can hold down the button and fire repeatedly, which really isn't that helpful. I believe there's also actually an automatic rifle, which is a lot like the machine gun. So, with that basic groundwork for how the game works, on the surface, Virtua Cop seems really simple. It's a very early arcade title, and the mechanics are pretty straightforward, but there's still a lot of reasons why I think it's a special game. Firstly, and this is a clear bias on my end, I really like early 3D games, particularly because they use simple geometry to build their environments. This makes it very easy for me as a viewer to kind of look at the silhouettes of shapes, study the physical geometry, not just the texture work or the ability to hide edges, but to show those edges and see how did an artist make use of those edges to define an object, like a barrel or a building. And this gets used to great effect in Virtua Cop, where they use these sorts of simple shapes to build entire environments that your virtual camera is smoothly moving around. The environments are complex. There's always something on screen for you to look at and remember a scene. This makes your kind of tour of each level very interesting. The music itself is also very high energy. Sega was always really good at building these poppy, synthy, high energy soundtracks, to keep you motivated for playing. If you're playing Outrun 2, if you're playing Afterburner or this game, you want to continue when there's that momentum, that kinetic energy pushing you. And in the case of Virtua Cop, that gets mixed around a little bit with the kind of funky riffs you'd come to expect from a cop movie's soundtrack. So not only do you feel motivated to continue, but you feel like you're a cool cop trying to save the day and beat the bad guys. And while cop movies in general, and especially arcade shooters, aren't really there to tell you a narrative, the simple narrative they do provide just to give you the context of the conflict at hand does a very good job of paying tribute to the source material, these mid to late 80s, early 90s cop movies. You have a very quick setup of the bad guys that are smuggling weapons. You have the business suit corrupt leader of the bad guys that's just making all the money. The whole late 80s wealth can be corrupting, a bad thing. It doesn't stop the game to tell the story. It lets the theme imply most of it, and the idea is the person playing is pretty familiar with what this source material is. So I really respect the fact that you get this little cutscene if you let the game play, and there's obviously an epilogue when you finish the game, but otherwise, it understands the structure. It got out of the way, and that I can always applaud a game for that. As far as difficulty goes, Virtua Cop is a very easy light gun shooter. I've played quite a few light gun shooters, but even for the NFGL, it only took me 2 playthroughs to kind of refamiliarize myself with the game and ultimately beat it. There's a lot of reasons for why it's easy. The most obvious one is the fact that each bad guy has this green circle on him with the little wedges that approach 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. The idea being, once those wedges reach those points, the enemy will fire, and it also highlights each of the bad guys on the screen. This is not typical for light gun shooters, but can really kind of point out bad guys on the screen. And for those that don't play a lot of light gun games, that can be very helpful. Also, the first level has a very nice, smooth, flat ramp, bringing you into the difficulty and introducing the mechanics. Things get a little more punishing in the second level, and by the third level, it's just all-out war, kind of a celebration of the skills you've learned up until the finish. It's got a very good difficulty ramp. Me personally, I think that Virtua Cop is a very good introduction to light gun games for those who don't play a lot of them. And really, finally, what makes Virtua Cop stand out to me is not just, as I said earlier, the narrative themes, but how they take movie tropes like cars crashing through walls, or bad guys snarkily laughing at you and then having a big bazooka. Virtua Cop tries to weave a lot of these little memorable moments into the levels and into the bosses, and they all end up acting like landmarks of sorts. They give you something to remember when you're done playing the game beyond your own skill, because the game's not long. It'll take you about 20 minutes to play through it. But there's not only those non-interactive moments, but there's also enemies that you fight. Like in the second level, there are 2 pieces of construction equipment that get driven by bad guys, and you have to very quickly shoot the driver before he runs into the vehicle and does damage to you. It's a small thing, but no other part of the game has that specific conflict. So that makes level 2 stand out. And then level 1 has its introductory feel to it. You're always going to play level 1. You're always going to remember it. In level 3, you've got the nice send-off and payoff of fighting the bad guys in their home base. You get to fight a helicopter, which is really cool. And you, of course, get to knock out the suited rich bad guy, which is always satisfying in action movies like this. So overall, I totally recommend playing Virtua Cop. I think it's a wonderful game. I was very pleased to play it again. I don't know how much more I can gloat about it, talk about how great it is. So I'd say, hopefully I've convinced you to at least take a look at it. Try it. If you have to buy a Sega Saturn, you're doing yourself a favor anyway. I had to round up a CRT television to play with the gun. That was kind of a pain in the ass, but it's a light gun game. It's worth it. So go out there, play and have fun. Thank you for listening to me ramble. Can't wait to see what you guys are streaming and what you say about your games. This is your commissioner, Sam Bushman, saying good night.